Well, it's the middle of the week. I'm glad you are with us today for this video devotion. Just want to remind those who are part of our church family that in our Vision 21 document, we explain that we as a church family exist for three reasons: to love God, to love people, and make disciples. And I say that because in the middle of John, in these chapters we're looking at this week, he's dealing with the religious leaders of Israel. And it's obvious that they would not admit this, they would not think this of themselves, but it's obvious that in the eyes of Jesus, they care about their religion, their ritual, their traditions, their rules more than they do people. That loving people isn't always as easy as we think because things get in the way of it, including religious tradition. And you remember two days ago when we were in chapter 5, Jesus healed the lame man. They got upset with him because that happened on the Sabbath. And Jesus healing them on the Sabbath broke one of their rules, and Jesus telling the man to walk and carry his pallet and go home broke one of their rules. Well, now you jump ahead to chapter 7. That's still an issue with them. And so let's read together verses 22 and 23 and then talk about it a little bit. He says, "For this reason," this is Jesus speaking, "For this reason, Moses has given you circumcision." Moses wrote circumcision into the Levitical law, "not because it is from Moses, but from the fathers," referring to the patriarchs, Abraham and so on. That actually circumcision was something God gave Abraham, and it preceded Moses and the law, preceded Moses and the Ten Commandments. Verse 22, "And on the Sabbath you circumcise a man." What God told Abraham and what Moses wrote in the Levitical law was that they were to circumcise newborn males, newborn boys, on the 8th day. Well, if someone was born the day before the Sabbath, jumping 8 days ahead, that would put it on the Sabbath day. So they had this conflict. Their rule said you don't do any work, and that would include helping somebody, healing somebody, doing surgery. And so we can't do that on the Sabbath. That's violating the rules. But we're also commanded to circumcise on the 8th day. We don't want to violate that one. So they made an exception for the circumcision, and they would circumcise people on the Sabbath if that's when the 8th day fell for that newborn baby boy. That's what Jesus is saying here. But here's where he drives his point home in verse 23. He says, "If a man receives circumcision on the Sabbath so that the law of Moses will not be broken." Okay, since you will circumcise a male boy on the 8th day, even when it falls on the Sabbath, because you don't want to break that rule about the circumcision, he's basically saying at the end of verse 23, why are you angry with me because I made an entire man well on the Sabbath? He said, you will operate, do surgery, and circumcise a kid on the Sabbath if it's the 8th day. I healed a man who was paralyzed, and you got mad at me. If Jesus was talking in modern English, he'd say, what's up with that? What's wrong with you people? Don't you get it? And then in verse 24, do not judge according to appearance, but judge with righteous judgment. In other words, righteous judgment does not look at just the outer stuff. It looks at deeper stuff, the inner stuff. In many ways, the more important stuff. And how do I apply this to us? Well, let me say this. Sometimes it's easier for us, whether in church, in religion, in business, in schools, in government, in the court system, all of those things. It's easier for us just to have a whole bunch of black and white rules, and we just enforce the rules. And no evaluation, no judgment, no discretion. In church, back in the 70s when I first got saved as a teenager, you got long hair, you ain't right with God. I had someone for a few years who was not a member of our church would send me a letter about once a year criticizing me for not wearing a necktie every time I preached. Actually, he sent me a necktie one time with this. And I have to say it was an ugly necktie, so I never wore it. But those rules, it's easier to be a religious person who follows rules and evaluates people on the basis of rules rather than doing what Jesus talked about, righteous judgment, that looks at the bigger stuff, the more important stuff. In our culture, we've limited the discretion that judges have in sentencing, and I get that. I understand it because some liberal judges and giving sentences, but the result of that is that we've flooded our prisons with people who've committed petty crimes with long sentences because there's no discretion. It's 3 strikes and you're out. We have zero tolerance policies, and kids are punished for simple little mistakes in ways that just defy common sense, because having rules and following rules is easier than using common sense and making righteous judgments. On and on I could go. So whether it's in life, in secular society, or in religion and the church, we need to guard against taking the easy way out and making rules more important than people, and not judging righteously. Well, that's what the rule says, so yeah, I know it's a little harsh, but I don't care. That's what the rule says. I don't think God wants us to live like that, treat people like that, act like that, think like that. God wants us to value people. And can I be honest, sometimes those of us who are really, 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 really religious have the hardest time at really loving people because they don't always match up to our rules. And we struggle with that sometimes. I think we have to humble ourselves before the Lord and allow His agape love to flood our hearts. We know right from wrong. But people matter. People matter to Jesus. They need to matter to us. Jesus was flabbergasted that they got mad at Him for breaking one of their rules when He actually helped somebody. When you find yourself getting upset because some tradition was broken, even though we're helping a lot of people, you really need to take a hard, long look at what matters most to you. God bless you. I'll see you tomorrow.